This is Dead Man's Tale. I'm struggling to even fit it all into frame. It's a little over 5 feet long, but I'm going to take you through the process of it. It took me about 3 months to design everything in Fusion 360. I'm not an expert, but learning thanks to YouTube videos. And then printing, sanding, Bondo, more sanding, and then painting, and it's done. And I'm really happy with how it turned out. I made this for a friend, so it's still actually in a few pieces, so I can't really pick it up. It's just kind of held together by some tape on the other side. But yeah, I'm gonna bring you through the process of how I made this. You can see the lever arm is functional down here. This is the trigger. There's a pen spring in there I designed. And then the leather wrap at the end here actually has little 5.56 bullets that I printed out and painted as well. They're obviously fake. Don't, report me. But this is Dead Man's Tale from Destiny 2.
So I realized while editing this footage, I didn't have actually many glamour shots in it. So I figured I would take this close-up video of the gun and just show you some of the details to the model. Here's the lever arm and how that actuates on its little hinge on the inside. You can see the trigger here moving with the ballpoint pen inside of it, the spring at least. This is the detail on the foregrip, some of the detail along the side of the barrel, and then towards the tip of the barrel and the muzzle. You can see up here the detail I put under the sight rail, the little bull inscription, and then there's some vines that go along that gold U. Here's the hammer and how it hinges along the buttstock, and then this leather piece that I sewed to house these dummy 5.56 rounds that sit quite nicely inside the loops that I made. But that's the gun. Hope you like it. I wanted to blow everything up so you could see how it was all put together. We're going to go from the front all the way to the back and name each part so you guys are familiar with it. So this is the muzzle here and with the holes in the front. This is going to connect to front barrel 1 and slide in like that. The reticule piece will sit on top here. Front barrel 1 connects to rear barrel 1, and then these rods will slide on the end of the side ones. These are the right and left barrel rods. Moving back, again, front barrel 1, rear barrel 1. This is front barrel 2 and rear barrel 2. They both connect to the grip on the top with this little rectangle cutout. The grip has 2 front grip pegs at the beginning at the front, which slot into there, and then rear grip pegs, which slot into the grip plate, the holes on the back. Then rear barrel 2 slots into the receiver piece. This is receiver on the right receiver because it's cut in half. It slots in with these holes on the bottom, and then this piece also connects to the other half of the receiver. The firing rod is in the middle here. This is the left and right hammer mounts, which I'll show you a close-up of later with the hammer. This is the receiver peg, which is going to keep the right half to the left half. This is the top of the lever arm, which rotates on a pin here, which is built in. This is the trigger. There is the lower lever arm here, and then the lever arm peg, which keeps it all together. It was too big to print in one piece on my Ender 3 V2. Moving further back, this is the other half of the receiver. There's a receiver pin on either side. This is the left one. It just slots in. I printed it separately because that should be gold. The other stuff should be gray. Moving back from here, this is the front stock. And then we have the upper and the lower gold arms. These slot in like such there, and then this one connects the front stock to the front lower stock. From here, this is the rear stock here. It has pegs on either side like the grip. These are the rear stock pegs, and these are the rear stock to shoulder pegs. These ones are actually a little bit shorter than the shoulder pegs, so that's how you know. From here, the rear stock uses these pegs, which goes through the shoulder stop
and into the shoulder rest here. This is the upper shoulder rest. This is the lower shoulder rest, and this is the front shoulder rest. These two are connected by the upper shoulder rest peg, and this is the front shoulder rest peg. So that's everything all laid out and blown up. So once you have everything printed out, I wanted to mention I forgot one piece in that video, which is the sight rail. This sits on top of front barrel 2 and rear barrel 2. There's two little pegs on the bottom. It just kind of sits in on that, and that one is on top. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned it. Once you have everything printed out, you have to start the super fun process of sanding everything. So I took each piece and just begun sanding it with 100 grit sandpaper. Now this just kind of gets some of the layer lines off, you know, it'll start to smooth it out a little bit. It'll look a little rough at first, but really that's okay. It's just the beginning. I've skipped this step before of pre-sanding my parts before I primed them, and the end result didn't really look that good. So you do want to make sure you sand it down to start. After everything's sanded with the 100 grit, you want to make sure you wipe it off. And then I filled it in with Rust-Oleum filler primer. It seems like everybody uses this in the kind of prop making, 3D printing industry, if you will. Really just does a good job of filling in the gaps between the layer lines and stuff like that. After everything was primed with the filler primer, I came back at each piece with the 100 grit just to kind of smooth it off again. I didn't want to take off too much of the filler primer because it uses a lot to paint all these pieces, or well, prime them. And then once I did the 100, I went again over them all with 220 grit. It kind of ended up looking like this. Here's the grip piece, for example. It's not perfect yet. It looks better on this side probably. This one looks a little worse. It's going to need a little bit more. After I do everything in the 100 and then the 220, I'm going to come back at it with Bondo. Just a note, I didn't film anything while I was sanding. It's not that exciting to watch me sit there for an hour and a half and sand, but make sure you're wearing a mask. You know, if you have a proper respirator, that's good. I had a couple extra, COVID masks laying around. It gets a little dusty. I did it outside on my patio, but you don't want to be breathing this stuff in. I printed this all in PLA. This is Hatchbox, black and then white, because I ran out of black. But if you're printing it in ABS, you really want to make sure you have a mask because that stuff can get toxic with the dust. You don't really want to breathe that stuff in. All right, before I do any of the Bondo and sealing on the rear stock or the shoulder stock piece, I want to glue them together. So what I have here is some Gorilla Glue epoxy. It's a 5-minute epoxy, a little stick to kind of stir it together. I have a hot glue gun in case I need to weld the edges over. I don't think I'll be using that, but I have it here just in case. And then obviously a clean surface just to get some of this epoxy on and not worry about it ruining anything. This stuff can kind of smell, but it's not that bad. It's once you start mixing it up. I'm gonna do the stock first, so I'm gonna move the shoulder stop out of place. I don't have the piece in the middle here, the stock stop, just because it's all gonna be different colors. I don't wanna glue everything together just yet. So I have the rear stock, front stock, lower front stock, and then the two rear stock pegs. Again, these are the ones that go in the front here rather than in the rear. Those are a different peg. That's the stock to shoulder rest peg. So I have these here. I'm gonna mix up some of the epoxy, put it on one of the ends here, and then just kind of insert both these pegs, and then I'm gonna worry about attaching everything else. So let's move these out of the way for now and mix up some of this epoxy. Don't get any on your hands, by the way, because it's gross and it'll be there forever. So do kind of two little plunges. You just kind of make them in a line, try to make it even. Oh boy. There we go. I have a little metal stick, and you kind of suck the plungers back a little bit, wipe off any of the excess. I might need more, but I'm just going to use this much to start. Then just kind of cover these back up for now. Mix these up with the little stick here. It says you're supposed to mix it for about 30 seconds, just read the back if you have a different one than the Gorilla Glue that I'm using. And then I'm just going to use the little wooden stick here to just kind of apply some around the edge and on the bottom of the one half of this peg, and then I'm going to insert it into the rear stock here. I'm going to need a little more glue eventually, but epoxy, but this is a good amount to start with. put that here. We'll start with the top hole. Just kind of slide that in and kind of let it sit. It usually sets in about 5 minutes, so I might come back after and wait a little bit to do the front portion, but for now, let's do the other one. Just kind of wipe this on. Doesn't have to be perfect, obviously this is all interior stuff, and there's enough room here for some to spill over like that, and it not really ruin the appearance. Like if it was on the edge here and you were gluing there, that'd be a problem. You don't want to wipe it up, but right here, it's okay. I'm gonna let those sit for a little bit, and maybe I'll do the pegs into the shoulder rest here. So this is the upper shoulder rest peg. It's not a very big one, so, and it does get close to the edge here, so you don't want to do a lot on that side, otherwise you will have some leaking. But at the end of the day, this piece is going to be up against, you know, with a piece in between here. If there's a little glue leaking on the inside, it's not the worst thing in the world. So mix up a little bit more, put it on here, and just kind of, I might use the hot glue gun to kind of melt these pieces together on the shoulder stop, just because, you know, this isn't a very big peg holding everything together, but I'll seat that in there for now, let that sit to the side, and then we'll do the other one here with the front shoulder stop and the lower shoulder stop with this this peg here. This one's a little bit of a tighter fit on this side, so I might put it in on that instead. This one got a little warped while I was printing, but nothing a bit of Bondo can't fix. So I'll see if I have enough here left over. I might just. Let's use this. Okay. And then obviously we're going to go and start Bondoing these seams afterwards to ensure that it's all seated properly. You could probably put a little Bondo between these two parts, and I might just, or not Bondo, sorry, epoxy, and just kind of go down the middle with it. I might do that. Let's mix a little more up, but I wouldn't glue these pieces together first. I would glue them to the other part of the stock, just so you know they're sitting in the right position and you have all the edges lined up properly. So let's grab a little more epoxy and do the second half of this. Two little lines again, pull the plungers back so nothing leaks out, and then just kind of cap it for later. Obviously you don't want this stuff leaking, and it smells pretty gross, so let's do that. Okay, perfect. Throw it off to the side, wipe it off my hand, and mix this up again. Okay, let's start with the rear stock here. These aren't quite set yet, but I think once everything's together, it's gonna be okay. I'll lay it down on its side for now. Let's do the, you know what, let's just line them both up and do them at the same time so we don't risk getting the edges not perfectly aligned. Go here, just get a little along everything. Sorry if it's not fully in frame. There we go, grab a little more. All right. And then I'll take whatever I have left over here and I'll just put it between these two pieces, just so that there's a little bit of a seal between them two, not just on the pegs, but there we go. All right, let's just try and put these together for now and slide them into position on this. Beautiful. I guess it looks like this more so from the pictures, but just make sure everything's lined up. I have a couple clamps. You probably don't need them. But if you want to be anal about it now, obviously throw some on. I just want to make sure these edges aren't misaligned, because then it just creates a lot more sanding to do, and nobody likes sanding. So I can have one of these little mini clamps here. I might throw this on here just to ensure. It's not really the best size for it. You can do it up here. All right, let's just make sure everything's lined up. Press it down. The clamps will work a lot better on the smaller pieces. Well, these clamps at least, because they're not very large, but let's just make sure everything's perfect. And then we're just gonna set it off to the side to dry. I hope it doesn't fall over. I will do, let's do this piece next, just because it's gonna be a tighter fit and that'll make it a little easier. I'm gonna need a little more epoxy. I wanna make sure there's enough on this. I'll throw that. All right. There was a version of this you can buy that was called a no stench version. It was like a couple dollars more. Obviously, being a rookie and just a hobbyist, I didn't think it was worth it. This does smell pretty gross, but you know, it's not that bad, and as long as you don't have it right over your face, you should be just fine. And obviously, you don't want to breathe it in though, because it probably is toxic. I'm sure you could read all the labels on the back, and it would tell you everything about that. But ignorance is bliss, right? Okay. Make sure there's not too much on here. I don't want it gooping off the sides. And then this orientation, it goes down because it curves along with the stock. And let's just get that in there. Okay, so I have a little bit gooping off the side. Just have a little wet paper towel here and kind of, you know, wipe off any excess just so you don't have to sand it down later. I mean, I'm gonna have to sand it regardless, but I don't want to be sanding epoxy. I'd rather just be sanding the Bondo. And as I'm pulling this, I don't want to make sure it stays together. Oh my God, I did this upside down. Ha! Well, that's why it's 5-minute epoxy, eh? Here we go. Yeah, this should go with the top hole here, because this is going to connect like this, and then this comes down. So glad I made that mistake on camera, but glad it's not super glue or hot glue, because if it was hot glue, I'd be screwed. I've made that mistake before, and I've had to peel prints apart, and it hasn't ended well. So there's your orientation. This is the shoulder strap. If you wanted to attach, you know, a strap, if you're doing cosplay, you can clip on a shoulder strap there, and there's another piece on one of the barrel portions. Let's just leave that there to rest. I'm gonna wait until this settles to do the upper portion in here, but it's gonna be the same process. I probably won't capture it on camera for you guys. You'll know what to do. But that's assembling the rear stock and then the shoulder rest. So it was time to paint some of the pieces gold, notably the trigger, the grip mount, some of the smaller little connectors, and then the trigger as well. And I needed to paint those pieces gold before I inserted and connected the left half side of the receiver, which I've already completed here. I'll show you that. I had to have the trigger inside of the two pieces before I glued them together, before I painted this, because I wanted to seal the seams across the top. I put the firing rod in first. You really don't have to do that, since you can just slide it in from the back. I would have left this out if I'd done it again, painted it separately, then at the end, you know, slide it in, because I had to mask this portion off when I was painting it, which was a bit of a pain. But to paint the gold, I had a couple of options. I had made these Triumph seals a little while ago. This one was a Rust-Oleum pure gold metallic. It's probably the closest color to what it actually looks like in the game, but I was making this for a friend, and he preferred the look of this one. It was a bit more yellow, a bit shinier. This one actually was a heavy body acrylic. It was specifically Liquitex iridescent bright gold. I got this at a Michael's craft store near where I live. I had also bought this Testors Aztec Pearl airbrush specific paint off Amazon. I didn't really like how this one looked. It was kind of somewhere in between the two colors here. It wasn't as shiny as this one, but it wasn't as dull as this one. So I ended up going with the Liquitex. Now, this one in particular, like I said, is a heavy body acrylic, so it comes out pretty goopy. It's not really meant for an airbrush like I wanted to use. So I watched just a couple of YouTube tutorials. You basically take, I'll link it down in the description. You basically take some of the paint, throw it in a cup, add a little bit of water, not much at all, and then keep mixing it until it's quite an even consistency. You don't have any lumps in the paint. Load up the airbrush, sprayed just fine. This was one of the pieces that I did. Probably not as shiny as the hand-painted one, but got the desired gold effect. So I was able to do that and then add in the trigger. I put a spring from a pen. There's a little cutout on the top of the trigger piece just so it has a little bit of play to it. I felt that it was a little more realistic. This one just kind of hinges on the, there's a hole, you know, kind of a rod that goes through. It's built into both sides of the receiver. And then this piece in the front just slots into two little posts on the either receiver side. And then for these bits in gold, I just hand painted these. I'm gonna airbrush this in a minute. I thought about painting this by hand, but it's just way too much surface area, and especially to cover the gray, it'll take a while. Now to create this gray kind of gunmetal effect, what I did actually was started with it was a Rust-Oleum gloss black. Just did one base coat of all of this, and then I hit it with a Rust-Oleum dark steel. Let me grab that for you. It was this one here, Rust-Oleum dark steel. Just one really light coat over the whole thing. Didn't want to mute the glossiness from the black, so it has a little bit of shine, even though this isn't a very shiny metallic gray. And that's how I did the metal effect on all of the pieces of the barrel. All right, so for the portions that were meant to look like wood, namely the grip and then the completed buttstock, I used the tutorial that I found myself online. I'll link it down below in the description. Really helpful technique to kind of create this fake wood grain that I managed to achieve. It looks like it would have been really hard. It was actually super simple. So what you used was this Rust-Oleum warm caramel, depending on where you're from. That was the base coat. I just did one coat of that on everything. And then I bought a cheap, chip brush, and then this Minwax wood finish. It's a stain, and this one specifically is the dark walnut color. Just kind of, I have way too much now. Just dip it in ever so slightly, and you just brushed it on. Again, the tutorial was really great. I'll link it down below. You can kind of move the brush a little bit as you go. You can make little twists to create a knot in the wood if you want, and then just kind of brush it over to smooth it out. But really pleased with how these turned out. All my friends who I showed these to, my neighbors and whatnot, thought these were actually pieces of wood rather than plastic that was painted to look like wood. The only other step I need to do with this before I assemble it, I have the other portions of the rear stock, is I bought this piece of leather off Amazon. I'll link it down below. I'm gonna cut it into shape and try and create the bullet wrap that goes around this part of the stock. I found this this model on Thingiverse. It was like a 5.56 dummy round replica. So I printed out 10 of them or so. I haven't painted the tips yet, but I painted the, I guess the cartridge. I'm not a gun person, sorry, I just make them. And then I painted this in a silver. It was a Rust-Oleum titanium light. It was just, a random silver I had laying around. Masked off this portion. I'm gonna paint the tip in the same gold as the other pieces with the airbrush, but this was just out of a spray can. I'm gonna figure out a way to cut this down to size and then use the scraps to create little loops that I can keep these attached to it with, but I'll let you know how that goes. All right, so the last major thing I wanted to build was this leather wrap that holds the bullets on the buttstock of the gun. I have no leather experience, or I had before this at least. What I did to get this leather to match the shape of the buttstock was I just laid it in some water, the leather itself, wrapped it around here, and then took a lot of rubber bands and wrapped everything around here, really trying to focus on this part to get the kind of the shape to match this portion here, because it just kind of stuck up and buckled, didn't really look that good. Left it there overnight, didn't have it on for too long, and luckily it didn't leave any major markings in the leather with any scuffs. After that, just kind of cut off the excess with a knife, be careful with that. And then to create these little bullet loops, originally I wanted to just hot glue them on. I did that for all, 3 of the 4, and then the 4th one wasn't quite working and I was getting a little frustrated. To make the shape though, I took the pieces of leather that I had laying around and got them wet again and just kind of wrapped them around the bullet and then really tried to hold it there. I'll link a tutorial that I watched on how to kind of work leather down below. Again, I'm no expert. Had it down and then just kind of looped, 2 for some, 3 for the other ones, because I wanted to do 5 on either side. And then it came time to sew this. Now, I'm not a seamstress, so my first instinct was to go out and buy a little, hand sewing kit. Don't do this. These are trash. The needles are super tiny, and it'll take you a lot of work just to get it through once. And when you have two pieces of leather stacked over top of each other like this, it takes a lot of force to get it through. So what you need to do that, I didn't know this, and then I learned, was a leather punch. And this is one I bought at Michael's. It was like 10 bucks. It has a bunch of different sized holes. I just used the smallest one available on this, which was 2 millimeters. Basically, you take a little piece of leather, just kind of put it in there, and then like a hole puncher, punch a little hole through it, and it allows you to work your string through it. I ended up buying another kit of needles as well. Michael's, these are just kind of regular repair needles, a lot larger, and then some kind of string. I'm not really sure what this was. It was waxed, had beeswax on it, which apparently you're supposed to use for leather stitching projects. Again, I'm not an expert. But I created a little cross stitch on the ends, and then just a loop back and forth in the middle, and then another cross stitch at the top. And it's a little ugly on the inside with just all the random bits of fiber, but that'll all be hidden once this is glued on to the buttstock. To do that, I'm probably gonna use some more Gorilla Glue epoxy, and maybe a combination of that and some hot glue. Haven't quite figured that out yet. But after that, everything will be done. It'll just be, assembling the pieces that I'm gonna have and then packing them up and shipping them out to my friend. And this is the finished prop. This is Dead Man's Tail from Destiny 2. I had a lot of fun making this. A lot of this stuff was new, the techniques, the stuff with the wood, airbrushing the gold. I really had a good time, designing this. It took me a while, 3 months in total from I'm gonna make this to here it is. But again, super happy with how it turned out. There are a couple things I might change for another revision. If the files look different, I might change this gold bar down here and this metal one. I might just change how they kind of fit into the stock, because it was a bit of a pain to attach, especially the gold one. And then maybe how this all connects up here, and maybe the pieces connecting here. I might make that a little sturdier, because I had some issues with some of these pieces breaking when I was trying to sand them and paint them and whatnot. Other than that, if you have any comments, feel free to drop them down below. Again, check the links down below for any of the tutorials I mentioned along the way. The files will be down there as well. Feel free to give it a go. I'd appreciate it. Also, the files to the Outbreak Perfected that I've made in the past. I'll show you guys a shot of that now, pop it up on screen. And yeah, thanks for watching again. Like, comment. You don't have to subscribe. I have one video. That's okay. But have a nice rest of your day. Thanks for watching.